We just saw incredible images of what's happening around the world, images showing how, in fact, sea level rise, acid in water, how these things are affecting our community. Of course, we are impacting our natural resources, particularly water, and it is impacting us. We begin our discussion right now with Queen Quet. And Queen Quet, you have been talking about this for decades, long before it became fashionable, if you will, to talk about this issue of climate change and how it's affecting this first element, water.
Mm-hmm. And when I so glad for day one more again with Hun about this, yeah, because we have to correct we teach for let all the rest of the people in the world know that we the binya, we in the guina way tall. But when I correct my teeth with this thing with the water, I start for yet the ancestors when they would have said things like get away, Chile Jordan, get away, oh Chile Jordan, get away, Chile Jordan, I want for cross over for see my long. People yeti we sing them song, they yeti thing like, you know, God going trouble the water. But we have no idea how much the humans have done to cause the trouble in the water now. All of what you've outlined, the ocean acidification, even when we look at sea level rise, we know it is a direct outcome of what we're now calling climate change. So it is about how us humans are an element that's contributing negatively to the water. And you know, here in the Gullah Geechee Nation, we said the water to bring we, the water going to take we back. So I'm happy that the water is now that element that's drawing us to the shoreline to really take a serious look at our behavior on land. This is an Anthropocene issue. It's a humanly caused issue. So now we need to go there. We need to do what our ancestors did. Get there on the shore, pray, meditate, focus, center ourselves on what is it that we've been doing that we can change on the land so that we can have a better reaction from the water. And maybe, just maybe, the water would subside and the sea levels won't keep rising. Because if they keep doing that, then these sea islands from Jacksonville, North Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida, where we be, anything like that in the Gullah Geechee Nation, wouldn't be here. We'd again be submerged. There's a reason we call it the low country. We are ecologically, technically below water level, because at one point, all these islands were covered with water. But right now, we want to reverse that tide and not have that come again. So I'm very happy to be here tonight as one of the humans who wants to be a positive element on the water.
Queen, thank you for that and for really setting the tone for this conversation tonight, because it's one, I know that you've worked very hard for many, many years, all of your adult life, and perhaps even longer, to try to stimulate this kind of conversation. But first, I want to know, what kinds of reactions were you getting from people when you were trying to make them aware of some of the concerns you were seeing?
Well, as you know, you and I have been on this show together for some decades now. And so you knew the beginning, the work. And the work wasn't easy because at first, the first thing that we saw was that the trees were laying down. And we knew trees don't lay down. Our animals go to lay down. We go to lay down in the evening. Trees don't do that. So when we started seeing trees laying down, we would say to elected officials, there is something going wrong at the shore. And it's happening very rapidly. And they would say, oh, those are just emotional natives. They wouldn't pay us any attention. They didn't think it was something worthy of them examining to set policies to stop the overbuilding or anything. They thought, oh, no big deal. Now those same folks are the ones that want to yeti what we crack teeth about. They want to hear what we were saying all along. And now they're interested in engaging in a discussion about what is it that is part of the traditional knowledge of the Gullah Geechee people and other indigenous people that could reverse some of the harm. But we only wish they had listened back then, because maybe we wouldn't be dealing with so many other harms now.
Thank you. And then Queen, I'd like you to once again give some more perspective in terms of what can be done. We know we are certainly watching the damage every day, but what can we do right now? What can an individual do to try to mitigate some of the damage that we are seeing?
Well, a lot of folks always, look at it and think, well, the politicians need to do it or somebody else needs to do it. But all of us can start to look at ways that we can green even our own space. So let's say, for instance, a lot of native Gullah Geechees, they're landowners already. So one of the things that we don't encourage is clear cutting of trees. If you've already cut out a bunch of trees, then let's start thinking about what we can replant. That helps keep soil in place. And so even if we have waters that are rising, then you also have something to kind of absorb things and hold things instead of getting it dragged away where you lose part of your coast. Also, people who are saying, well, I'd like to build something else. Well, don't build into the shoreline, because that contributes all the more to the ocean acidification, because the things we build with tend to have chemicals in them. Then those chemicals, when it rains, those things run off. Where do you think they end up if we're on islands? In the waterways. So even when we think about the rooftop of our houses, or we think about roads, let's use natural things. Let's make it, penetratable surfaces, right, by the water, that the water can actually go in as pervious. It's not something like asphalt. If we pave too many roads, I know a lot of us feel like, oh, we got the fancy cars, we got what some people call a SUV, a SUV, right? We don't want to, get all that dirt on it. But it won't hurt you to wipe off the dirt as much as it would hurt you to have flooding come into your house and your yard because you paved over all the stuff to just make new roads and new driveways. We have to think of more natural ways, because water finds its own level. It finds its own level. So if it has a natural place to go back down into, then it's more likely to go back out quicker than if we pave it and then it sits there and then we get the flooding that you and Justin were just talking about in the urbanized areas like Charleston and even Savannah, Georgia, Jacksonville, North Carolina, Jacksonville, Florida, any of these urbanized, Brunswick, Georgia, any of these urbanized areas that we know. Beaufort, the city of Beaufort, deals with this now, downtown historic Beaufort, where the water has nowhere to go except into the houses and into the historic buildings. So I think that each as an individual can start to think about how to live more naturally, how to live more in balance, have more agricultural lands around, have more things designed, maybe with a landscape architect, or being that landscape architect yourself, with more trees, more flowers, more places that will give a natural place for the water to kind of go back out. I think that starts off where it's something we all could do. If you start off with a little planting of a tree, a flower, that's your first step. And then we can go to larger pieces as the time goes on.
And what about the pollution and how water has changed and what we are actually pulling out the water? Most of us who live in this part of the country, we enjoy seafood. Absolutely. But there's a lot of seafood that is now damaged because of what's in our water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the biggest things right before, as we said, Rona get you and things like that, before coronavirus set in, we had started to get people, especially in South Carolina, to stop using plastic. Stop using plastic bags, stop using plastic straws, stop using plastic bottles, because a lot of that is what we are finding in the water. Unfortunately, with the onset of the pandemic, people are now finding masks in the water as well, because now some of y'all, your mama ain't raised you right, but some of y'all, your mama did, you just ain't acting right. All right, that you should not throw those types of things that are not biodegradable out of your hand just wherever. Throwing it out the car window, walking, throwing it out your hand. Always put those things away in recyclable receptacles or proper receptacles for them, because ultimately, yes, somebody has to clean it up. And unfortunately, as you have said, Sister Murray, they end up in the water. And the water doesn't have people to just go on it and into it to clean up. And that then harms our seafood, especially our loggerhead turtles that we love so much here. They end up choking on them. Sometimes this goes into the whole cause of the ocean acidification. Even us washing our clothes. it's amazing to find out that our clothing actually has a certain amount of plastic in some of it. And so that even when we wash and that goes out into your drain field, if that stuff ends up seeping out, we end up with more of that entering into our waterways. And so ultimately it's very important, and you know, especially to us, because we will have a crab boil or fish fry in a minute. So I see you smiling, Justin. We will have one in a minute. And so there's no way that any of us who are from this coast, much less the people that come to the coast, want to have shrimps or crabs or fish that we think have been negatively impacted because of acidification or because they've ingested something that we could have kept from getting into their home, which is the water.
And Queen, I know Justin is smiling, but he probably wants to add something. We think of fish, but we also think of birds who are often confused when they see plastic and things like that might look like food in the water. Queen Quet just chimed in that, it's really a big issue. Queen, why don't you make your comment? Thank you so much for putting that in the chat. But if Queen is able to join us right now in the conversation about air.
Definitely. I made the comment that they are already making money and they are not protecting the air, the water, the land, or anything. What has to happen, and this goes back to what Justin and I talked about a little while ago, and the value system that my sister Lorana is talking about, is these folks value money. So until we incentivize greening the communities and greening the very work of their production of these products that they're making money off of, then they're going to continue to just do what is about the dollar, instead of what is about the sustainability and the true public health of the communities that often are the ones that suffer the brunt of these big companies making their money. And so human life has to become more valuable, and having a green environment and a healthy community has to become the value system that's incentivized. Unfortunately, in a capitalistic society, you have to speak the same language. So if they were getting some type of kickbacks or getting some type of incentives up front, let's say your factory has to go green, or your community, if you build this factory here, you have to also build all this green space, like what we talked about before, and have places that are healthy and healing and so forth, and even medical centers to deal with some of what you've already done. Then if you say, well, it has to be a trade-off, then maybe we could get a real situation started that would change this and would reverse some of this, and we could all breathe.
Yeah, we would all like to be able to do that, and to do that safely and without risk of our own, our wellness or pretty much our lives. I think that's the point where we are. And I also wonder if any of you believe that we don't realize how much power we have to make demands of these people in position of authority and in position of influence. We, as the average citizen, don't realize that we actually could make more demands.
Absolutely. I go back to Frederick Douglass. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. So until we actually not only ingest that, but live that, we don't take our own power in our own hands. We have it, but we're not using it.
Be a part of this discussion about this thing we love so dearly, and yet it is so abused. And we're talking about the land. And so Queen Quet, we begin with you. You've already talked some about the land when you talked about the way trees are doing something unnatural that you've seen along the coastal communities. Let's talk more about the land and how you've recognized it changing.
Mm-hmm. First, I got to say hallelujah, glory to God, ashe, and amen to the pastor preach tonight. Thank you, man. And so, because I was sitting here literally cleaning my nails before y'all put the spotlight on me, because I looked down and realized I still had some of the earth under my nails from being out in the field, planting the exact same field that my ancestors that had been enslaved on this same property, thank God for the mother, they to all generations later, that we still own it that we still farm it, that we can still harvest from it, that God has still blessed this land and this earth for us. And so I never take the earth for granted. And I always say to people, the land that we family and the waterway that we bloodline. And if Hana children think free, Hana be free. And so if you would think of the land that way, how could you poison it? If you think it's you, how could you poison it? It's only when we compartmentalize, and too many of us who are indigenous people and people of African descent, the children of Alkebulan, as I like to say, when we start thinking like Western folks, then we think we can only put it in the box. So they even got us gardening in the box, not working field, not working the land, not feeling the totality and the wholeness of it all. So for me, when we talk about the things I've seen, it's more about what I feel. I feel the ancestral energy and the power it gives me every time I literally touch the land. My shock was, sisters and brothers, was when I was asked to go to Chicago to speak for the Chicago Urban Conference to help people with disaster preparedness, and started in discussions about food deserts and things like that, but realized there were community gardens. And I said, well, wait a minute, but the community garden is supposed to now be the answer to you not being in a desert. That's your oasis. And they said, but guess what, Queen? We got parents that won't let their children touch the earth. They won't let them go out there because they say, y'all trying to put my kids in slavery. And I said, well, then that tells me that we got a lot of educating to do. Because if they think picking a tomato to take back in the house, to cut it naturally and have it on a sandwich and so forth is slavery, then they don't know what slavery was. And so we have to stop maximizing ignorance. We need to minimize that and maximize education and engagement in these natural spaces so that we can open our spirits to, again, feel the power and the energy of our very ancestors that even exist within these trees. Our burial areas are full of them. And as I said to someone today, because I'm fighting a desecration of a burial area right now, those trees are monuments. They carry the very spirits of our ancestors in them. And if Huna sit and need them and yeti for a little while with your spirit, not just with this year, but with your spirit, you'll hear them speaking and they'll help you. God will guide you, order your steps on how to heal. And it starts with the land being sacred. It starts with you realizing you are the earth is you, the water is you, you are the water. And when we get there, my sisters and brothers, then it's shouting time. It's shouting time because we all will exponentially change the world in a positive way. But we have to do as Papa used to tell me, God bless the dead, going back to old landmark. And we got to get back to living naturally and not compartmentalizing and think that's out there and we're somehow over here. It's all one. That's why the Gullah Geechee Nation's tree is human bodies inextricably tied together, but rooted in the land. And y'all know I always say, one must take care of the root for heal the tree. Let's get to the root of the problem.
Where do you think it is most important to start with some of these conversations about how we can have positive impacts, beginning with an individual? Is it more important that we start with, perhaps, people who have a few more years behind them, or is it more important right now that we speak with children?
I think it's both, because I grew up in an intergenerational community. So I don't think you talk to the lily children, you can't talk to the grown people, because what they used to tell us, if children are taught the children, out of the blind leading the blind. So at some point, you're older than somebody, even if you ain't but a minute older. And that 1 minute could have made all the difference in the world, right? So I feel like we have to have intergenerational learning at all times, because the elders are the real repository of the things that the children need to know. And what the children need to know, you must teach them, is how the statement goes. So I think we have to do it collectively together, and we have to look at it holistically as a global family.
So hello, everyone. Again, I want to thank each one of you for giving me a spot here, a voice here. And I was watching that clip and I was thinking, this looks really familiar because that's the kind of environment, unfortunately, I grew up in. The city that I grew up in Pakistan, Lahore, is one of the most polluted cities in the world. The air quality index of that city right now, it's reached up to 178. Just to give you an idea, Greenville right now, I think 12 or 15, and makes it really unhealthy. And what is happening with that, and I bring this to you because the discussion of global warming has to be dealt on a global level. We cannot discuss global warming um, and just talk about our local areas, right? So it has to be a global warning. It has to be a global discussion. The idea of stewardship, which is so heavily emphasized in Islam, and not many people know about it, is what got me into this discussion, right? The idea of how much is on my shoulders, how much, um, because there's a story in Quran, and I heard the word steward so many times in this discussion, that God said to the angels, um, "I'm going to create a human," and the angels said, "Are you going to create someone who's going to cause corruption on earth?" And this foresight of angels actually amuses me. The angel said, "Are you going to create something that is going to cause corruption on earth?" And God says, "I know what you don't know." So the humans have been given the choice to make and break, to for construction and destruction. And at the end of the day, it's not our need. It's not our need which is destroying us. It's our greed. It's our greed, right? So we really have to, and all religions I know that they talk about it, the fact that we have to think about others, what we have to do for others, what we do for ourselves, and think about others, if what we think about ourselves. So we cannot just isolate ourselves in this issue. So it's really important. I want to share some statistics with you that the 20,000 times we inhale that polluted air is actually bringing the life expectancy down globally, right? So the people have shorter lifespans because of that. And on global level, it, according to the World Health Organization, is 1.8 years. In Pakistan, being one of the 10 countries of the world affected most by the global change, the life expectancy is coming down to 2.7 years. And the city of Lahore that I'm talking about, the life expectancy has been brought down to 5.3 years. So it's at such an alarming rate. So I cannot sit here in Greenville and not think about my mother, 72-year-old, sitting in Lahore. And we are all, brothers and sisters, either in faith or in humanity. So it has to be, the global warming has to be dealt as a global warming on a global level. Um, so if Pakistan achieves, a sustained improvement, the residents can live, up to 1.2 years. And the city of Lahore, the life expectancy can increase to 1.9 years. And there is like this billion trees tsunami because Pakistan has a forest cover of just 5%, where the UN guideline asked for 31% of forest cover. So that is how the deforestation, the industrialization, um, is wrecking my city, my country. So there is a billion tree tsunami that has been called for Pakistan. So I always think, and I apologize because there is political representation here, but my late father died uh, talking about the thousands of people killed in Pakistan, um, thousands of people killed in Pakistan because of the drone attacks, right? And I always think, we should not be sending drones, we should be sending books. And maybe this is the time we should be sending trees. We have to be seen as not the bully of the world, but as the big brother of the world. We cannot talk in isolation, stay in isolation, and not think of this global village, right? So we are in this together. This is our fight. So we have to watch out for the have-nots, even if they are across seas, even if we don't see them. But we have to think about them. When you introduced me, you said I'm an activist, and activists are those who cannot just sit, but they have to act. And I feel that and I'm sorry about that, I didn't see that coming, but if we really want to truly change the world, it has to be a global conversation. And that's just my 2 cents. Thank you so much.
Beautifully, beautifully said. I believe we are all moved, Fareeha, by what you just shared with us. Thank you for your compassion and for just such wisdom. Wow, you filled us with so much information, and thank you for so clearly and passionately explaining the need. And so we want to know, how can we help? What are next steps? What can we do right now to help you in some meaningful way? That's one of the questions coming in. What can we do right now to help you and to make sure that communities who, just have not been top of mind, that we don't, because we are all a part of this, all of us are impacted.
Yeah.
Some impacts we see on a daily basis, and others we will see it in the long run. So what can we do right now to help?